I'm gonna start recording now. So basically I got...
Okay.
Are you getting me? David, are you hearing me?
Yeah, you're breaking up a little, but I'm hearing what you're saying mostly.
Oh, okay.
Breaking up a little bit.
Okay. So basically I heard about your show. I got an email through Jonathan Slaff. I've known him for a couple of years now, and so just from the press release alone, it sounded really interesting. Just the fact that you'd been doing the theater critic thing, and then all of a sudden transitioning to, well, maybe not all of a sudden, but transitioning into doing the more of the playwright aspect of things, and that kind of got me interested. I didn't get to see your show, but yeah, I mean, as you know, like I asked if I could interview you, because I've been sort of doing the theater critic thing too. Obviously, I've been working part-time at Off Online for the past couple of years, as well as doing my own blog. I don't know if you did any sort of like dig on like sort of what I've been doing, but and I mean, I know you... I'm sorry?
Who publishes Off? Is that Jonathan's thing?
No, Off is we're sponsored by Helen Mills. I don't know if you're familiar with like Helen Mills. She has her own like theatrical space. So yeah, I mean, we're kind of small. It was apparently defunct for a while in the early 2000s, and we're trying to like build it up again. And so I think I'm one of the few sort of like people that's come on in the sort of the revival of it. And so yeah, so it's been a couple of years like writing somewhat steadily for it, between that and also my own blog as well. So yeah, so I just kind of wanted to like pick your brain as to sort of how you got started in the whole theater thing, and like, because I guess, I don't know, like from the way how I got into the theater critic thing, like I didn't set out, sort of thinking that my goal would be to write reviews and to write about theater, but that's just sort of how it came that way. So I just kind of wanted to know, like, if you always saw yourself as a theater critic, or if you just sort of fell into it the same way that I did, and yeah, basically how you just started from there.
Well, yeah, this is going back obviously a couple of decades. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. So I started actually from the other side. I went to NYU for film and TV years ago.
Oh,
to be a filmmaker, and even more of a filmmaker than a playwright, but the filmmaking never really panned out. So I got into theater more because I would go on like Wednesday matinees after my physics class and things like that. I went to the tickets booth, went up the applause and things, and just so see theater, and I got really into it. And then it just kind of went into a couple of different places that, because I've always been a writer, and a place that would give me a column to write about theater. And I said, well, why not? I'm taking this. I'm taking dramatic lit classes. I went on to study playwriting and screenwriting at NYU after my bachelor's. So I thought, hey, let me use this opportunity. They're publishing me, and I can, while I'm trying to write plays, I am trying to make money in the real world. I have a day job, and then let me go to shows. Let me review the stuff that I'm seeing. They'll give me print inches. There'll be people reading what I'm writing. Why not? And I started that way on a couple of little Long Island publications. And then tried to freelance to other places and got into backstage a few times and got into show business back when that was a real thing, and other places like that. That was the beginning for the first couple of years.
Wow. So you just basically kind of steadily did that? I mean, I know you also from what I can tell on your website, I mean, not only do you run a blog and stuff, and it seems like you also aggregate, if I understand it correctly, you aggregate other critical reviews onto the blog. Is that what Criticopia is?
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, no, thanks for asking. What happened was years ago, we're talking 25 years ago, I decided to do an actual hard copy magazine/journal that was called This Week on Stage. And it was my reviews along with other people's reviews from around the country. They would just submit to this magazine. It was basically, it wasn't even desktop. It was basically almost a Xerox sort of thing. But, and then that became a little unwieldy to put out every week, so I turned it to a month. I called it This Month on Stage. And it was just hugely thick. It was sometimes like 90 pages.
Wow.
Of my reviews, everybody's reviews. What happened is we published reviews, and then as long as the show was still running, we keep the review in there until it closed. So it just got thicker and thicker every month, and it was, we didn't have the subscriptions to pay for the cost of actually printing and mailing it. And printing and mailing was cheaper back then. So finally, I just said, I'm going to give that up. Another thing is, let me just go online, because now we're getting into the late 1990s. Let me quit it. Let me stop. Let me do a website of it instead. I'll post my reviews there. I'll post other people's reviews there, too. And that was the founding of TotalTheater.com.
Oh, okay.
Which is the aggregator. It's not aggregating necessarily from other places. I mean, a lot of the writers write for TotalTheater.com. But we also offer theater critics, if they have the rights to their work and they want their reviews not just in the original place that they published them, but if the original place says, hey, yeah, it's okay, you can syndicate them. We don't have the rights. You got first rights.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's great.
So, so Criticopia that you mentioned is a section of TotalTheater.com. You go to the Criticopia section, and that's where Broadway, off-Broadway, and off-Broadway, regional theater, and international reside.
Right.
And then there's another section for our articles and interviews.
Oh, okay.
And so, but the thing was, in the middle of, like a year after I got out of the print business and just did the website, a close friend of mine named Richmond Shepard, you may have heard of him, he used to own a theater off Broadway. And he used to own a bunch of theaters in L.A. 30 years ago. He was also publishing at that point a hard copy publication called Performing Arts Insider, which has been around since 1944. It was founded way back when, even before Theatrical Index. It was the place that people would go to look to see all the basic information. It wasn't reviews. It was
like sort of theater A to Z kind of thing.
Here's the stars. Here's the contact information for the agents and the managers and the producers.
Oh wow! So sort of like a precursor to Backstage.
Yeah.
Sort of like a precursor to Backstage in a way.
Well, Backstage was more about auditions. Performing Arts Insider is more about, it is about auditions, but even contact information for an actor's agent or a manager. So it's connecting the industry with the performers and the designers and the playwrights. Okay. So a lot of the people who subscribe might be people who book for talk shows on TV. They'll say, hey, this show is coming up. How do I contact that actor? How do I contact that playwright?
Right.
And that information would be in there. I mean, then we also have the casting agents and the folks working on shows. So it would be helpful for actors, too. But it wasn't directly competing or anything with Backstage and show business. It was more along the lines of the industry, the entertainment industry knowing everything that was coming up and who was handling it and how to contact everybody. So he was running that for about 10 years. And he wanted to give it up to go do more directing and acting and writing and so he said, Dave, I don't want to kill this because it's still got a good subscribership and it's a handy thing. Do you want to take it over? So we made a deal, and I ended up taking that over back in 2000 and have been publishing it ever since. He's still co-publisher, mostly in name only, but he still does some stuff. And so I run that too. So but that's a hard copy. That's not on the web.
Okay.
It has a website, but that's just for subscribing. It's Performing Arts Insider, and now in our, I think, 72nd year, something like that, of putting that out. So I do that. I do TotalTheater.com. And what else? I have a radio show that I do every week.
Right, yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, yeah.
And somewhere in there was a period of time for about 6 years when I worked for Playbill. So that was like my big, thing that made me somewhat, not famous, but well-known in theater writing and journalism circles. I was their head writer for a year and a half, and then I became their editor for about 4 years.
Okay.
So, and was the managing editor back then. This was going back to 96 or 98, up through about 2002. Wow. I was there. Probably, it was probably 96 to 2002, something like that.
Oh, wow. I also, in sort of like my research, came across the fact that you were just recently named editor, I believe, of StageBuddy.com.
I'm sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I am an editor in their theater section. This fall has been insanely busy because I've been doing my play, and I teach. I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Northern Colorado. I'm teaching 4 English classes. So on my desk are 90 research papers that I have to grade a week. So it's I've had to let StageBuddy kind of be on the back burner for these past few weeks. I'll get back more into it and do more editing and more stuff for them in January. Right. But right now, I completely forgot about that. I was doing videos for them, occasionally reviews, a weekly article for them, editing some other people's stuff. I've been involved with StageBuddy for a few years, on and off. So I'm the history column that they have there. I update that, and I do the daily history column for them. Right. So, yeah, StageBuddy too. I forgot it. I'm sorry.
No, because I mention it because they recently contacted me and asked me to write for them, and so I've been like trying to figure out sort of like when the right time was to start like my first article and stuff, and it's sort of been the same thing where like I've been busy between off online and like my other part-time job, and life kind of takes over, and so like the new gig has to sort of be set aside for now, and it's a good sort of like segue into what I wanted to ask you, which was because it's something that I've come across, like especially in the last 2 years, and really especially in the last few months in writing, is that sort of just like how to balance the deadlines, and like I mean, it's kind of like probably bad for me to like admit as someone who writes for publications to sort of say like that I'm really horrible with deadlines, but I've kind of always have been, and so like I just like I was also very
deadlines are my saving grace. Deadlines keep me on point. But if I didn't have them, if I didn't have a deadline, back when I was doing more for StageBuddy, I would shunted that off for other things. But I knew I had to do a column a week. I knew I had to update the histories when something happened, the show opened, somebody died, and I knew that I had to do videos I would not do them every week. I would load them up. I'd do 3 or 4 at one time, and then scatter them over the course of a month. So but I got them done because I knew, hey, if I want a paycheck, I better meet my deadline. Right. I have there are 3 or 4 times a year I do cover stories for a publication called Long Island Woman out in Long Island, and I interview some pretty famous people, and it's a cover story. And when I do them, I get them done because it's a sort of okay paycheck, and I know that's a pretty visible place for my work to be. I mean, it goes all over the place. Everybody reads it. So I know, hey, that one I go early on. That one I try and finish as fast as possible because it's one of the bigger chunks of things I have to. They tend to be 2,500 word pieces as opposed to the stuff I write for everywhere else, which could be anywhere from 300 to 800 words. So that one I get to. But if I didn't have that, if I didn't have a writer's group, that I belong to that meets once a month, and where we read every other month to each other. I want to finish my play, probably, or in the time that I did, because I've been a playwright for 30 years and I haven't written that many plays because everything else gets in the way.
Right.
So deadlines are a wonderful thing. I also write a monthly column for Long Island Pulse magazine, which is this glossy, and it's really grown over the past few years, this very, very good-looking culture Long Island magazine that you get everywhere on Long Island. And I do their theater column. So I know I've got to get that to them. And the killer is their deadlines are very far in advance. So I've got to write like the January column sometime in early November, if not earlier, which is kind of weird. So that sucks because I like to do reviews, and I've got to make sure it's something that'll be open 2.5 months from now when I'm still writing about it. So all of that is just to say deadlines can really be your friend. They really are.
I mean, I do get that, and I definitely, for a while they were really good in keeping me on my toes, but it was like sort of the thing that you mentioned about like the word count and things like that, and for me, like, Off Online, they're very stringent on it being like not past like the 700 or 800 word mark. And for me, having come from like a more creative writing place, that was a little hard for me. And so I think lately it's just been like knowing that like I've become sort of a little more hyper conscious of like how I'm writing my plays. So like, do you ever sort of get hung up in sort of the way, not plays, reviews, sorry. So do you ever get like hung up in sort of the style of how you're doing reviews, or do you ever sort of kind of, because I worry about like sort of rushing it and like sort of in a way half-assing it, just trying to make the deadline, and I think that plays into a big factor of maybe why I have so much trouble with deadlines, is because I really like, I tend to edit myself, and I tend to really just want to make it easier for the reader.
Back in the day, the folks from the major dailies would have a few hundred words, and they would duck out of a musical about 15 minutes beforehand. They'd have their notes. They'd get on the phone to the newspaper. This is going 7 years ago, and have to bash out something and be brilliant while doing it. So we're incredibly lucky. We get to go to post openings or previews or preview week and not have an overnight deadline.
Right.
So that almost sometimes works against us because we want to ruminate, we want to get lazy, we want to think about things, we want to write a paragraph and then chunk it. If that, we think we've got an opening paragraph and then it's got nothing to do with what we really want to say.
Right.
Sometimes you just have to barrel through it because 800 words is a lot. That's a lucky thing to have. I was used to, in most of my writings, being much more limited to about 400 to 600
and
words.
Then in the print publications, it's also pretty short.
And actually, they say even online, people want to read shorter stuff. They're not going to go 1,200 words into something that you write online. People don't have the time, they don't have the energy, the patience. Their eyes are going to skim. They'll skim a bit if it's a long piece and maybe get down to that last paragraph to see what do they really think. But, you should be able to say it in about 500 words, unless you're Flying Gold, or somebody like that. And you really want to expand and expound upon things. Then, you're a Brantley with 1,500 to 2,000 words or whatever he gets.
Right.
But your average person, they don't even get that. And you can say a whole hell of a lot in not that much verbiage. If you go back and read old John Simon reviews from New York Magazine, he didn't have that many column inches.
Right.
But he crammed everything into 400 words. And he could blast something to bits in one paragraph.
Right.
And you knew everything you need to know about that show not to go see in 100 words.
It's weird. I guess for me it also like it depends on the show too. Like if it's a show or a theater troupe that I've seen before and I've known and loved, it's like you know, I want to say so much more about it, and like, but how do I say it with, you know, like in a more succinct way? But of course, like I want to like, you know, expound on it, like again, like you said. And at other times, like if it's a show where, I mean, luckily for me, it's been more good than sort of quote unquote bad performances that I've seen. But like, you know, the ones that where I feel lukewarm about, like I feel like those are the ones that I can even like I have more trouble with, because it's like it's really hard to sort of like, you know, get how you feel about a show within just a day, or you know, within maybe like, 'cause usually at my best I'm like, you know, 3 hours maybe, like I'll be able to churn it out. But like sometimes it takes me 3 days to just sort of figure out how I feel about a show. So I'm wondering if you've ever sort of...
That stuff. Uh-oh, you cut out there. What? You wondering what?
Yeah, no, I was just saying, like, I wonder if you've ever sort of like had the same problem too, in terms of...
hell yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sometimes they come like nothing. Sometimes it takes forever, and you're just slogging through it. That's the nature of the beast.
Right.
I would suggest actually that you try, if you have the money and the resources, and I think they even have partial scholarships. Have you heard of the O'Neill Center in Waterford?
I have. Mm-hmm. But I was under the impression that they only like... I mean, I didn't do much research on it, but like I was under the impression that they help sort of workshop plays, or is it basically any kind of writing?
The O'Neill workshop, the O'Neill Center basically functions to grab a dozen playwrights and help them work their plays through, their promising plays, and the O'Neill Center helps them get the plays together, puts them on in readings, the playwrights go back and change from one reading to the next, because they see it physically done in staged readings, right? So that's the main focus of the O'Neill Center. But connected to it is something called the National Critics Institute, which offers fellowships for critics to go to the O'Neill Center for boot camp, which lasts about 3 weeks now. It used to be a whole damn month, but I mean they've compressed it to about 3 weeks. And you go there and you take seminars and lectures, and you go to see these productions of these stage readings. And then you go, you know, the production starts I think 7:30 at night. Some of them are outdoors, some of them are indoors. You sit through them. Then about 9:30, 10, you get back to your dorm or wherever you're staying, and then you have to go write a review. And it's due by 8:30 the next morning, when you sit around a big old redwood table with your instructors, and you correct them and read them and see what's right with them and what's wrong with them. And you do this day after day, and you basically lose your mind. After a couple of days, because you're incredibly sleep deprived. It's like, you know, almost like a retraining camp, like the Chinese used to do when Mao was in power. You know, they basically reformat you as a writer and as a critic and as a person. But when you come to the end of it, you've had information and instruction and help and guidance from, you know, pretty solid, real, long-term critics and writers. You've seen a dozen plays that you've written about. You've revised your work. You've done different kinds of reviews. You've been asked to do reviews in 200 words. You've been asked to do a review in 800 words. You've been asked to do a review where you have to concentrate just on the plastics, the lighting, the set, the sound, and not so much the narrative. Other reviews where you'll concentrate just on the performance, or you're going to try and link the physical production to the performance. I mean, they'll give you all these kinds of exercises to do, and ultimately come out of that presumably a better. You come out of it brain dead, but then a week later you regroup and you've learned a lot. So I highly recommend it.
I'll definitely look into that. That sort of called to mind sort of how, sometimes like for me, like writing a review, like it can sometimes feel like after you've done it for a while, you sort of kind of relegate to like a formula. And like, so I tend to sort of go by the same, like, okay, I start off like the starting paragraph will be about, you know, like a summation of like what my impression of the show is. And then I sort of delve into like okay, the second paragraph is like the plot summation, and then go into like the lighting and then the acting and stuff like that. And so I mean, for you, is it do you write a different review every time? Should it be a different review every time, or is it better to stick to sort of one like way of writing a review in terms of a formula?
No. I mean, you have to understand, I also don't physically write that many reviews anymore. A lot of the things I review, I do on my radio show. Okay. Just because I don't have the time and energy to physically write. I don't want to take 3 hours out of my life, with all due respect. Right. Unless I have a deadline or a place that's going to physically publish it and give me money. Right. So mostly I will go see shows and make notes and then talk about them on the radio. Mm-hmm. It's easier for me, and I love the radio and I love to talk. So but back in the day when I was writing dozens of reviews a year, mm-hmm. 4 or 5 a week or more sometimes, you would fall into patterns, and you can't help it. You have a certain style and a certain flow that you have, and you also play your strengths, for better or worse. So I know that my strengths are talking about the text and the plot and the narrative and whether the show had an effect on me or not. Little less about acting. I'm not per se an acting expert, although I can certainly say certain things about someone was good for this reason or someone was not good for that reason. Right. And much lower down are what I call the plastics of lighting, set, sound. I notice them, I appreciate them, but I'm not going to be that into them or care that much about them or spend a chunk of my review about. And critics are, especially in the O'Neill Center, they tell you about this. You get to what they call the ghetto paragraph, where you lump all the tech stuff into the ghetto. So, the costumes by so-and-so were really colorful, and the sound design was occasionally too loud, but, and the music was cool, and the lighting, there was one very effective lighting scene, all in one paragraph, towards the end of the review. You get it done, because you want to mention them, and then you move on to back what you really wanted to talk about. The better critics, and the ones who have more time and more mental acuity, will weave in the tech stuff, the plastics, throughout the review. Mm-hmm. And they will go, perhaps, look at a performance and talk about it almost by noticing the shoes that they're wearing, the heavy, clumpy shoes, and how that brings that character down to earth, and how that actor plays that character, and you can feel it through the shoes that they're wearing, that sort of thing. If you have the time and energy and mental ability to do it, that's fantastic. Most of us get 300-400 words, and if we even have time to mention the design, we'll do it in the ghetto paragraph. Right. But if you can mix it up and have your reviews have different styles and takes on things, every once in a while you do a letter to the playwright or a letter to the producer, maybe something like that. All of us have written terrible reviews when we've seen something like a Moliere play and we want to do it in rhyming couplets. I mean, that kind of stuff. It's actually helping. The review itself may suck, but it may open you up when you've gotten into a rut to do something like that. So for that review itself, it may not help you, but it may help your next 20 reviews to do something like that.
Right. You mentioned you mentioned the acting and everything. So, transitioning now into, you said you've always written plays, you've always considered yourself a playwright.
Right. So when I was a kid, I was writing plays. I was writing stories and stuff, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. So how did the whole solo show sort of come out? From what I could tell.
Thank you. I was wondering, that's my play. Okay, yeah. Now we're talking, yeah.
So from what I could tell, it was it's based on your experiences as a theater critic or within the theater community.
Sure.
Sort of, how did you how did you sort of decide when you wanted to write about that? What was the process?
So, thanks for the question. What it was this was something that happened to me 25 years ago, somewhere in that range, 20 to 25 years ago. So I was already a critic for a few years. I was already doing it. And then this incident happened to me, the one that I recount in the second, well, throughout the whole play, but mainly in the second part of the play. This, what I think is a very funny, very human, very crazy, nutty incident that happened. So I would tell this story to friends because I love it so much. I love telling it. Didn't enjoy going through it, but I enjoy telling it in retrospect. And, you know, a lot of people, they would just laugh like crazy and they say, oh, like, you got to write this down. Same. And so over the years, I knew I could never let that story go. And I kept embellishing. And it's not a story that I could tell properly in like 5 minutes over the dinner table. That's not something I could say. Well, this happened to me. I want to tell the whole thing. I want to set the whole scene.
Right.
So finally, ultimately, a couple of years ago, I just said to myself, let me get it out there. Don't like this is an essay piece or an amusing column thing, or can this work as theater, as a one-man show? And I was like, let me get it out there. Let me start writing it as a monologue and tell it. And not just what happened, but as I started to write it out, I wanted to weave in bits of my life as a theater critic overall, because that sort of sets the mood, the milieu of not just, hey, I went to the theater one night but this is what it's like being a New York theater critic. This is how long I've been doing this. These are some of the shows I've seen that were wonderful. These are some of the shows I've seen like, oh my God, I can't believe I sat through that. And these are some things that I learned being a theater critic over the years. That's kind of the first section of the play. And then, and I also set up that night during the first section. And so that people know, oh, you know, when I go to the theater, this happens and that happens and that happens. So when I went on this particular night, et cetera, and so forth, they're following me through it. And then the second half of the piece is really, okay, boom, I went to this Broadway theater and this happened. So that's and so I started writing it out. And it flowed very easily, writing it. Certainly that first draft did, because it's a story that's been in me for 20 years. Right.
And
it was, okay, get it out. And it was about X amount of pages, and I thought I really had it, and then I realized that it was way long for a one-man show when I did that first draft. And it didn't look like it, because it was only like 25 pages. And I thought each page is like 2 minutes, and I was like, oh, wait, no. Each page is about 4 minutes. No, again, it's got to be cut. Then that was the tough part. The tough part is killing your babies, as they say, killing your darlings.
Killing your darlings, yeah.
Yeah, killing your darlings. Oh, that was... It wasn't hard that first go-round. I could find a lot of stuff to chop, but getting the show down from about an hour 50 to even 90, 85, 80 minutes, that was killer. That was... Now I was starting to lose stuff that I really did love, that I thought was important, phrases that I loved, stuff that I knew would get laughs, and it was just boom, and boom, and boom. And my writers group was hugely helpful in that. And just having to... Doing it in the Boulder Fringe Festival, which I did in September of this year. I was accepted into the Boulder Fringe Festival for 5 performances. So I did them there. When I first applied to the Boulder Festival, the play wasn't finished yet. And I assumed it was going to be an hour-long play. So I took an hour-long time slot. Because I had hour-long and I think 80-minute or 75-minute time slots. And I thought, I'll get this down in 55 minutes. I'll tell it. I'll do it. And then realizing a bit later on, no, they're really kind of expecting it to be closer to an hour. So I better chop this thing. I got to, boom, get this, and I don't need that. And I had this whole, epilogue kind of thing that I really wanted to leave in there, that I've had to cut, that kills me. And even then, I sweated blood to get the show down to 85 minutes, no intermission. It's between 80 and 85, depending on how much people have. But, and they were brutal about it, not without cause. And said, hey, if you wanted a 90-minute slot, you needed to say that to us 4 months ago and pay, for a 90-minute slot, not, there's a different pay scale than the other one. And we're not going to let you do it. And you either get your show down to 59 minutes or you do something else. So I was forced at the Boulder Fringe, unfortunately, and people were very angry about this. I can't cut this down to an hour. I cannot suddenly memorize a show that is 20 minutes shorter and gut the hell out of it. So I ended up cutting it in half. And I did Act 1 a couple of times, and I did Act 2, as it were, a couple of other nights. And people were pissed because they got paid twice, but they went to see the rest of it. And, people who saw Act 1 were like, wait a minute, you're not even telling the story that you promised you're going to tell us.
Right.
Like, sorry. I got to be out of here in 1 hour. And I was. So they liked what they saw, but especially people who saw only Act 1 were a little ticked off. It's like, where the hell's the rest of the play?
Right.
Like, sorry, gotta come back. Yeah. And if I'd been wise about it and had my wits about me, I would have said, just talk to them, and they'll let you in free, because it was not like we had totally full houses every night at Boulder. Right. So if you have a ticket from the first, you just come back. But, I was concentrating on just doing my damn show for the first time. I'm like, I don't want to deal with the logistics. Don't talk to the box office people. So it was a mutual thing. I should have been more proactive, and I think the folks at the Boulder Fringe could have been more understanding, quite honestly. So,
how was the transition from Boulder to New York? You did it for one night here, right? It was a reading, or was it
just one night?
Okay.
No, Boulder was also not a reading. It's a fully staged play. It's a one-person play, but no, it's all in here. Okay. And I was ready. By the time I got out of Boulder, I didn't have to do too much, because I knew the play worked. I saw part 1 work to a point, and then I saw part 2 work like gangbusters. So I just had to, get them together, do an 80-minute piece. I've been rehearsing it all along as a full-length piece. So I was ready. I was just waiting to get it done in New York, and had an excellent experience with the United Solo Theater Festival. That's where they did it in New York, over in Theater Row, at the Theater Row complex in the Studio Theater. Yeah. So I did it Friday night, October 23rd. My only disappointment was maybe not being a little more proactive with them of trying to get another date or time, because I had some Jewish friends who couldn't go on a Friday night, and then critic friends. Friday night in October tends to be a pretty busy time. Right. So they can say, I'm already booked. I told them about it 3 months earlier. They could have held the night, but, people are. They'll make excuses. But some are legitimately like, Friday night in October at 9 o'clock. Why couldn't you do it at 5? Could have gone to that and then seen something else. So, I'm hoping to bring it back, to bring the show back in April. Okay, in a longer form. I was able to raise the money for the show through Indiegogo. Crowdsourcing. It was a wonderful thing. We had a campaign. I wanted to raise the base amount to bring the show to the Boulder Fringe, to pay the rather expensive fees to get into a Fringe festival, the very expensive United Solo Theater Festival fees, the plane to and from New York, and various the shuttles I have to take to the airport, and some other fees for to pay the stage managers, to pay basics to get the show done. Right. And people were incredibly generous. We went about 133% over our base goal of payment. So we're able to have the show exactly, except for cutting it in half, exactly as I wanted it in Boulder, exactly as I wanted it in United Solo, and there's still money left over. So I want to put that towards, there's not a lot of money left over, but there's some that I want to put towards New York and bringing it back, and also to bring it to other places. Right. So I may do another Indiegogo campaign. I don't know how many people are going to give it again or a second time now that I've done one. But we'd really, really love to bring this to Chicago and Florida and other Milwaukee and places that appreciate it, and back to New York. To my issue is that to really do it in New York and try and get reviewed and at least considered for nominations and things, you have to do something like 18 performances over a certain period of time. Oh, really? You can't just bring it in for 4 or 5. And expect that the Drama Desk will take a look at it, or the Outer Critics Circle will, or certainly
like
on the
Innovative Theater Awards,
or any of those folks.
Right.
So you've got to be there for a while. Well, I don't live in New York anymore. If I do that, that's a major undertaking. Right. So for now, the idea is still to just bring it back for a couple of performances in April, try and get some more critics to see it, get some producers on board, maybe try and get an agent, and see, not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. Well, hopefully, that stuff works out. I want to know a little bit more about like the performing side of things. Were you ever like? I'm sure like any one of us who's sort of kind of sort of gone into theater in whatever aspect has sort of had some kind of performing connection with it at some point in their lives. But I was wondering if ever you saw yourself as a performer, or did you initially start out as one, or did you do it in high school, or like how comfortable was it for you to do your show and perform it, having been a theater critic for so long,
well,
and just a writer for so long.
I'm very. Oh, sorry.
And as a writer for so long is what I said.
Well, no, I'm a ham, and I took an acting class in junior high school, and then another in high school, and got bitten then. And I acted in a high school play. Mm-hmm. My first play was "Come Blow Your Horn," the Neil Simon comedy, where I played the angry dad, which was just real typecasting. I thought they cast me as the nerdy brother. There are two brothers in the show. I thought I'd be the nerdy one who has no luck with girls and was kind of nervous and everything. Nope. They saw the anger, and then they went right with the angry father who owns the wax fruit company. So, but I loved it, and got hooked, and wanted to do more of it in college. Did a little more acting, but I really got into the writing side of it. I didn't go to NYU for acting. I was in the film and not even the theater school, the film school. Mm-hmm. So didn't get to do that much of it, and I really
no brush with any acting classes, even in the film school side of things.
Oh, I did. Oh, okay. I took but they were electives almost. They weren't that connected. And I auditioned for a couple of things. I did a couple of shows when I was in college. College shows. Right. I did Sexual Perversity in Chicago. I was very proud of that, and I thought I was very good Danny. And I did. And also, there was, if you've ever heard of Mark Jaffe Cohen, he was a gay playwright. He was on, Howard Stern used to have him on a couple of times. Back, I don't know what he's up to now. He became part of Funny Gay Males in New York.
Oh, okay.
But he was in my year at NYU, and I was in one of his plays. He was writing all these epic plays about being gay. Wow. So I think I played a waiter in one of them. I got cast. I was auditioning for stuff. Right. So that was cool. But there was a moment, and I it's one of the moments I wish I could turn back time for, where I auditioned for just a college production, at NYU. They were doing Sam Shepard's Seduced. And I was auditioning. I thought it was great. I was really, felt I was good and excited and right for it. But they cast me, and in this play, in that scene, I'm with two women. Who are also in the scene. So I don't even remember the damn play. But they had me there, and, I'm 5'2.5". Mm-hmm. And these women were about 5'7".
Right.
And while I was standing there, I knew, as good as I was, I didn't have a shot. Mm-hmm. I just, a week later, they still hadn't cast the show, and I saw they were still holding a casting notice. I said, I can come back in, I'll do a callback, I really want to do this. And then now we're just going to go another. They didn't say why. And it was a moment that I felt, I'm going to face this if I go off and try and do theater. I'm never going to be a leading man. I don't have the looks. I don't have the height. And what am I going to get at this stage of my life if I go knocking about? And now, the later me kind of thinks, after looking at people like Kevin Spacey and Bob Balaban and folks like that, had I stuck with it, I would be in a $2 million mansion in California. I wouldn't be famous, but I would be steadily working out. You see me on TV on Law and Order half the time. I'd be doing theater when I wanted to out in L.A. People might know my name. I think if I stuck with it, and that's not just hubris, I would have made it on some level. But I didn't have it in me. I let myself get crushed by things. So, but I loved performing. I ended up acting in one or two of my plays, my own, over the years. And then 4 years ago now, I co-wrote and directed a play called Shalom Dammit, An Evening with Rabbi Sol Solomon. So I was very involved in that.
I think I saw something about that on Total Theater. So, yeah.
So I was kind of directing in that, really, and working on that. So I've been, and in the directing, showing the rabbi how to, how I wanted the thing performed.
Is Rabbi Sol Solomon he's a character that you created, or?
He's a very close friend, and I worked with him in creating the character.
Okay. So slightly based on him, or?
Based on both of us.
Okay. Awesome. I sort of asked about the acting thing, and it's interesting that you mentioned about looking at, like, actors now who are closer to your age and sort of thinking, like, oh, you could have, like, stuck with it. Because,
William H. Macy. I mean, those kinds of, people who aren't 5'11", who aren't, back in the day when I was in my 20s, you want to be the lead, you want to get the great roles, and then what are you going to get if you don't look like so-and-so, if you're not going to get the girl, so I was like, oh, the hell with it.
Yeah.
I'll go right. But now I look back and I go, I would have been good. I'm not good. I'm really good at being me. I'm a very believable me, or versions of me. I'm not a Meryl Streep that can disappear into roles, or Robert De Niro back in the day. I'm always a certain level of me.
Right.
But I have a certain intensity and presence on stage that, I know the audience will gravitate to for at least a certain period of time.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's interesting to sort of think about, like, acting and theater and film as something that's very, like, youth-oriented, and that's kind of really common in the culture. But, like, to see, like, people like Kevin Spacey and Meryl Streep who, like, have done it for years and, like, are still getting great roles all the time. I mean, as someone who, like, is still kind of considering performing, I kind of, like, look to, like, people like Cate Blanchett and stuff, and, like, kind of hope, like, maybe 10 years later, like, if I do go down that route, like, maybe...
Just to be working and eating. I'm not talking about, I made a joke about The Mansion, but just
being, like,
be
a working
and making
actor,
enough dough.
yeah. Like, that's... I mean, it doesn't have to be, anything glamorous or anything, but if you're working, like, even just in, like, regional theater, like, off-Broadway, like, seeing people my age do it, like, when I saw Spring Awakening, like, 8 years ago, I was 19, and, like, most of the cast was around my age, like, seeing that, like, on stage, like, seeing people, like, who are your age performing, like, that like, was the thing that reminded me of, like, why I loved theater so much was, like, it's very vibrant and vital and alive, and, like, you don't necessarily have to be young, but, it is possible when you see, people your age doing it, like, you sort of think, well, yeah, that
you gotta love walking into that light and communicating and feeling it hit you, and quelling your nerves and just going out there and giving it, and and I sublimate it by teaching. I'm a very performative teacher, and I teach friggin' English. Comp. I could sit there at a desk and discuss essays and talk about grammar, but that's not me. I want to try and keep these kids awake for 75 minutes twice a week.
Right.
And in doing that, I'm on stage. And
in a lot of ways, teaching is performing too. Like, it doesn't have to just be acting. It can, a lot of other professions sort of require that skill as well. But I mean, it's interesting to think that you do the teaching thing, just because from what I can tell, just from talking with you the past few minutes, and also just from the website and, like, the whole radio show thing that you do, seem to have very much of a personality that is very outgoing. So, like, for you to sort of say that, it seems... Oh, sorry. No, for you to sort of say, like, to have mentioned that you were, that you're this, like, English professor, like, was kind of, not really confusing, but just like it's interesting. It's an interesting sort of counter to like I guess what's being presented at Total Theater and what you've led this sort of colorful life as a theater critic. So I mean, yeah, it's interesting.
Cool.
But yeah. So so the solo show, you said you had no sort of qualms in terms of performing when it came to New York, even just okay. So
I mean, it's nice. I mean, it helps that it's my story.
Right.
That I want to tell you what happened to me. It's easy for me. It's like nothing. I want to share this with all of you. Wasn't even hardly any nerves at all. Just go out there and do it.
So you felt like you didn't really have to distance yourself so much when it comes to, because this has sort of been a constant conversation, and I've been having a lot of these conversations with fellow writers and other playwrights as well about particularly with those who write about their own lives and put their life experiences into their writing and into their work, whether they're spoken word poets or again playwrights who have done solo shows based on their life. Like, I keep asking whether, and this is just coming from me, sort of my own personal questions about it, is like whether you felt like you had to distance yourself from the experiences. I mean, probably in your case it's different because it wasn't a traumatic thing that you were writing about.
It's not like I was raped by a buffalo. I have to go through it every night.
Right.
I wasn't an African woman who was, circumcised by her tribe, and now she has no orgasms or anything. No, I mean, I had a bad night, and kind of a funny night. I don't have to distance from myself at all. I love reliving it. I find it funny.
Right.
The hardest part for me in rehearsal and even in performance was not laughing, because I love, it's my ego, but I like the way I write, and I find the story funny. So especially when I get towards that second part, and if I see audience members start to, happily in New York, the lighting was such that I couldn't really see beyond the first row. But in Boulder, it was a more communal sort of setup, and I saw everybody in the audience, so I could talk to them in a way. I mean, not directly, but I could have contact. But if I saw somebody cracking up at some funny line that I wrote, it would be hard for me to not
break character,
join in. Yeah. And when the story really gets going in that second part, and I'm reenacting it, that can be very hard for me to keep a straight face.
Right. I mean, that's the thing I've found, like, something that I've always loved about sort of comedic performances is when actors break out of character, and the whole like letting the audience feel like they're in on the joke as well. So coming from that, like, I mean, do you do anything like any other sort of comedic work at all? Do you do like stand-up comedy or anything, or have you tried your hand at it?
Years ago, an old friend and I tried our hand as a duo. We called ourselves Grandma's Recent Hip Injury, which I was the funniest thing about us. And I thought we were pretty good. But again, time-wise, it was time-consuming. We sometimes didn't rehearse enough. Sometimes I went off script, and because back at that time, sometimes the lights would hit me and stuff would go out of my head, because it wasn't like I hadn't rehearsed it for a month. This was something like we threw it together, we rehearsed it twice, and then I get up on stage, I'm like, oh, I think I'm better now. So we did it a few times over at like a club called The Brokerage out in Belmore, Long Island, which may still be there. And we had a great time. We should have. It's another thing where I think we would have had fun if we stuck with it.
Right.
Could have been the next Sklar Brothers or something like that. But I did enjoy it. I haven't done the stand-up thing. I've always been tempted. But I feel like what I do is a little more. I don't want to shout above drinks and waiters and stuff and hecklers and 3 a.m. crowds. At least in a theater thing, they may not like you, or people may not laugh, but it's a theater situation. I'll be respectful.
And you're telling a story, and there's more of a narrative to it.
Yeah. It's a different thing. Colin Quinn, I'm sure, prefers, maybe not, but Colin Quinn prefers going into a Broadway or off-Broadway theater and doing what is essentially narrative stand-up rather than having to go back to Catch a Rising Star or Stand-Up New York or what's the one, Dangerfields or something like that.
Right. So are you working on anything else now? Are you, apart from sort of trying to expand the solo show, any other sort of...
It's done. The solo show's done. I'm not expanding it. It's done.
In terms of just like going to other cities and stuff.
So, not the play itself is finished. I'm sorry. There are things that I'm churning in my mind that I just don't have time to work on until the semester's over.
Okay.
This was all about trying to promote my show, get it to the festivals, memorize it, rehearse it, do it, get people in there. And now it'll be about, okay, let's raise some more money and try and get it done again. Mm-hmm. So deal with that, grade all my papers, get through the semester, and then there's something I'm thinking about possibly involving the rabbi again. I'm not sure, but I want to bring him back. There's more stuff that he needs to say right now.
Right. So wait, you said that with the rabbi, he was a character that you did in the radio show, or was he was a separate...
Well, the rabbi has been on my radio show many, many times. Okay. He does these things called rabbinical reflections. He hasn't done them in a while. There is mini sermons. They last about 4 to 7 minutes. And he goes off on topics. You can find them all on YouTube if you look for Rabbi Sol Solomon, rabbinical reflections. So he's been on the radio show since we started the radio show in 2002. But the stage show, Shalom Dammit, An Evening with Rabbi Sol Solomon, we did that. That was a play. We did that here in Colorado. We also did it a couple of times in New York. We did it at the Richmond Shepherd Theater. We did it at the Roy Arias Theater back in 2012.
Right.
So it was a play with music, satirical, his view of the world, his view on holidays, his views on the Middle East, his view on non-Jews, all sort of tied up together in a comic way with a lot of songs in there. Had a wonderful time working on that with him and getting that done. Wish that had gone a lot further, quite honestly. I was very disappointed that we did it in New York. We brought it back for 2 weeks, and not everybody loved it, but a lot of people loved it, and sort of just kind of dead-ended right there. And I want to bring that back at some point and do that again, because I think it's a wonderful show. But I think there's more to the rabbi. I think there's many more things that he can talk about in the Middle East and everything else going on.
Right.
That will be modified stand-up.
Right. For more topical
topical stuff.
Right.
Also long-lasting stuff, holiday. That was another show. That show was 2.5 hours when I first wrote it, and it wound up being 90 minutes by the time we finally brought it back to New York. Or no. It was still almost 2 hours with intermission on our second go-round in New York.
Wow.
And then we went back to Colorado and turned it into a one-act.
Okay.
And we made it a lot less offensive, unfortunately, but it was more popular. So sometimes you gut what you do to get applause and et cetera, and you kind of miss sticking the knife in a little. I still stick the knife in.
Well, yeah, I mean, why not?
Is there a way I'm supposed to do another? I'm supposed to be interviewing somebody else.
Oh, okay.
So we can continue this another time, or do you need more, or do you have more questions?
I think I pretty much have. I have pretty much everything that I need. Unless there's more about the show that you would want to put out there, or
everybody, please donate to Indiegogo.
Indiegogo.
My Indiegogo campaign is still up there. We raised our funding initially, but you can still donate if you want to. Okay. I want to bring this back to New York. The second week of April, I'm going to be in New York for a conference anyway. Okay. So I want to do it again, which means renting. It won't be part of a festival. It'll be renting a theater or finding a theater that will have me and split the take or something like that. So go to miracleoflongjohns.com, please.
Okay.
And Indiegogo campaign as well. Check out my radio show, davesgoneby.com. What else? And TotalTheater.com. So if anybody is really interested in what I'm doing, there's hundreds of hours of radio shows on our archives. There's tons of stuff that I've done on YouTube. If you want to see the Rabbi Show, that's on
iTunes, right? You have stuff on iTunes, right? The
iTunes we don't, as far as I know. Okay. Not on iTunes. All our radio shows, all 500-something radio shows we've done so far are either on the website davesgoneby.com or on Stage Buddy. They're there too.
Okay, so they're streaming on there. Is that what it is?
They're downloadable streaming or MP3 audio.
Okay.
And so please check them out there. If you want to go the Rabbi Show, the stage show, An Evening with Rabbi Sol Solomon, Shalom Dammit, that is on YouTube. You can actually go watch that, the longer version of it. And so if any producers or folks who want to invest and bring either that show or Miracle of Long John's somewhere, not just New York, I'm here. Contact me, please. Have a Facebook page. Say hi.
All right. I'll be sending those links along, posting it, and I'll let you know when this is posted. So thanks for your time. Thanks for answering and being very patient with the whole technology thing.
Great fun. Thank you for being that interested in my life that you spent an hour talking to me. I really appreciate it.
No, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I don't know very many theater critics that sort of do the whole critic to playwright thing and sort of do a solo show on it. I mean...
Probably the best known one, other than George Bernard Shaw, would have been Jeffrey Sweet, who's a longtime friend of mine. And he wrote a good play called American Enterprise, and I forget some of his other plays. He's steadily working. He's one of those playwrights who is not done on Broadway, but he gets other stuff done elsewhere. He's very talented, and he's written for TV as well. Jeffrey Sweet. Check him out.
I definitely will. All right. Well, thanks, Dave. So I guess this is it. And I'll be in touch. I'll let you know when this is up.
Great. Thank you. Right. Are you going to write it out, or are you posting the video? I'm not sure what you're...
Well, I mean, seeing as how, we couldn't figure out how to, record the video, probably it won't be on video, but,
Oh, you got the audio?
Yeah, I've got the audio.
That's my second interview, calling, sorry.
Okay.
In the back that...
All right, I'll email you.
Let me say goodbye. Thank you very, very, very much. Bye-bye, hon. Thank you all of you for listening.